There was outrage in the comments on my previous video where I said that a well-designed studio quality DAC is transparent and you can't hear the difference between them, because if they're transparent, then you can't hear the difference. That's the meaning of the word transparent. And people were like, you're an idiot. I've got DACs here. I can tell massive differences between them. It's night and day. You can, if you've got good ears, and your ears are obviously rubbish, you can't hear anything. You need to train your ears because you just can't hear the difference, but I can hear the difference, they were saying. And they were saying, you don't know what you're talking about because it's not about the chip, it's about the output stage. And it was like a Pavlovian conditioned response that all of the people in the comments were just saying, but the output stage is more important than the D to A chip that the manufacturer may have selected for that particular DAC. And then people were even confirming in the comments that they didn't really understand what output stage even meant, because they were going on about talking about other things that they thought were separate from the output stage, but that was actually just part of the output stage. But the most important thing is I put a blind test in that video of an original recording and then a loop back. So we're switching backwards and forwards between the original and the loop back version. So what is the loop back? The loop back is going out of a DAC into an ADC and recorded back in. So going out and in once in a loop back. And if there was such big differences between digital to analog converters, it would mean that they wouldn't be transparent, because if they're transparent, you can't hear the difference. That's the definition of the word. And so if there's big differences, then by definition, they are not transparent. And so if a DAC was not transparent, you would be able to hear some deviation, anything at all, not just like, you don't need to describe it, you don't need to tell me which is which, you don't need to know anything, no. All you need to do is detect any difference whatsoever. The bar is so low, the poll results are in. Over 1,300 people vote. In fact, so many people voted that I just closed the poll. I was like, there's enough responses already. And I'd actually found this so interesting that I made into a study. Like I've done this once before with the analog modeling plugins. Well, now we've got it with DACs. I've done my second study, and you can find it on my website. So you just go to my website, apmastering.com, under studies. You'll now see my second study that I'm publishing, peer-reviewed by you. And you can read that study if you want. It should be an interesting read for anyone who's interested. But I'm just going to explain the results and what I actually took away from this, because I found this extremely interesting. So in the comments, everyone's saying that I'm an idiot, output stage, and they can hear massive differences between DACs. So essentially the claim is that DACs aren't transparent. Then the results of this poll was so compelling. If you understand statistics, you will understand, like, the statistical power was like off the chart, and the p-value was just like astronomically small. It was like the p-value was 0.000000001. Like, if you don't understand what that means, it basically just means there's absolutely no way at all that this was like just reached by random guessing or something like this. These results are extremely statistically significant, and they mean what they mean. This is basically just like, boom, proven. You cannot argue. Inarguable, this means, because it's just, if you try and argue with this, you just don't understand statistics. And the result is nobody can hear the difference. No one could even tell anything. They couldn't even detect that I was switching at all, because there was a systematic under-detection of anything in that test. The correct answer was 7. I switched 7 times. And by far, most people didn't detect any difference at all. That was like 900 something votes. People didn't detect any difference whatsoever. But then the other votes, the additional couple hundred votes, were basically people thinking, oh, there was probably a switch. He wasn't just trolling me, so maybe he switched once or maybe twice. I can't really hear anything. I can't really hear that much. So yeah, maybe he switched once or twice. So a couple of people clicked once, a couple of people clicked twice, and it really dropped off really quickly. So if you know anything about statistics, yeah, it's like basically a leptokurtic distribution where it's just like centered around, I can't hear anything. And then there was a bit of a tower there, but like extremely fast roll off. So like literally no one could hear the difference. Proven. If you want to argue with these results, the only thing that you can do to argue with these results is say that there was some coordinated conspiracy of people who got together and deliberately trolled my poll. There's no evidence of that. I don't think that happened. Or like there could have been like some conspiracy theory that you could dream up. But outside of some conspiracy theory, fact, you cannot hear the difference. And so the converter that I was using, the D to A, the DAC that I was using was the TC Electronics BMC2, which isn't particularly expensive. It's now quite old. It's over like 15 years old now. It's not even a standalone DAC. It's like a monitor controller with a built-in DAC. It's moderately priced. It's not high-end really at all. And I sent that out over an unbalanced patch bay, actually a Eurorack unbalanced mini jack patch bay. And then it went back in via D-sub to my Motu 24 AI, which is not like a high quality stereo mastering grade ADC either. It's just like a recording ADC. And so I used a monitor controller with a built-in DAC. I used an unbalanced patch bay over mini jacks. And I used D-sub to recording interface. Nobody could hear the difference. And then, despite that, everyone in the comments like, you're an idiot. I can hear the difference clearly. Well, you couldn't in my blind test. So if you could hear the difference so easily between different DACs, you would be able to hear any difference at all between the original recording and this mid-tier gear that I was using to make this loopback test. You would be able to hear it. You would be able to hear it night and day, but you didn't hear shit. So sorry, you audiophiles. You believe that you hear, but you don't really hear. That's why blind tests are so important, because they just debunk the nonsense. It debunks the bullshit. It reveals the bullshit behind the marketing curtain of you can't hear this, but you pay because you believe. So anyway, what I did was I downloaded all of those comments below my video using some geeky coding stuff. And then I used Grok, so the X.com AI, to analyze all of those comments for the sentiment of what people were saying. So I read a lot of those comments, but there were so many comments at the end, like way over 1,000 comments. So I couldn't read all of them in the full length, because some people just like write novels, and if you write a novel on my channel, I probably won't read it. Unless you're like Dan Worrell or someone, then maybe I'd read it. But I mean, like, if you leave a novel, and Dan Worrell he's commented on my channel before, and he doesn't leave novels. He leaves like one sentence and then I read it. But if you leave a novel, I probably won't read it. But Grok would read it. And so I got all of the comments, literally. It was the amount of comments, it was the same length approximately as Brave New World. And so Grok just like ingested all of that information and analyzed it all. And most people were saying that they can hear a difference and there's massive differences, and they disagree with my video premises. That was what most people were saying. And actually, I got Grok to also read all of the comments and say, well, how many people here, what percentage of people agree or disagree? 54% of people disagreed with me. So a majority of people disagree with me and think that they can hear the differences between different DACs. But then the actual poll results say, nope, you cannot hear the difference. Like, fact. People aren't hearing the difference here. Not with a p-value of 0.000000. Like, you're not hearing the difference here. Looking at this DAC, a beautiful DAC, it might sound better than looking at an ugly looking DAC, or a DAC that looks cheap, or if it's got a label on it, made in China or something, and you've got another one, made in the USA, I don't know, some high quality hi-fi thing. Well, people will look at it, and that will influence them, because I literally put in that video the McGurk effect of when you look at the screen, it literally changes what you hear. It changes it from bar to far. Like, how much more of a big change do you want than a literal... it changes the word just by looking at the screen, and the audio stays the same. How much more of a big effect do you want of looking at something and hearing something different from reality? I showed you in that video. And then you think, despite that, you can hear the differences, the massive differences, but then when it comes down to the actual fact, you cannot hear those differences. This is the essence of the high-end hi-fi audiophile community. I can definitely hear the difference between that audiophile fuse that I installed on my plug. The second you understand the McGurk effect and you can differentiate objective scientific fact from marketing hype, all of this just melts away as a whole big soup of nonsense. But this doesn't just apply to DACs, it applies to so many other things in this big world of marketing bullshit. It applies to fancy speaker cables, fancy power cables, audiophile fuses, it's got fancy audiophile USB cables, and fancy gold-plated Ethernet cables. If you think there's a difference between an Ethernet cable that's gold-plated and a normal one that you get bundled with your modem, then you just don't understand how technology works. Sorry, this is stupid. There's an endless supply of absolute nonsense which costs a lot of money and doesn't do anything for the sound, and there's a plentiful supply of gullible fools with a lot of money, but a fool and their money are soon parted. If you decide to purchase a Patek Philippe watch for more money than most people's houses are worth, I won't think you're an idiot. In fact, the opposite. I will say, wow, that's amazing. I congratulate you because you've been able to make so much money over the course of your career that not only can you give to all of these charitable causes, after that's done, you've got so much money left over, you can buy stupid nonsense that doesn't have any meaningful impact in your life, like luxury watches that cost more money than houses, and that's absolutely incredible. And most people who have been able to amass so much money and sustain that over the courses of their career are actually incredibly intelligent people. And those people, of course, they're not going to go out and say, well, look at my watch that costs more than your house. It tells the time so much better than your iPhone. Of course not, because that would be incredibly stupid, and those types of people aren't that stupid. They know that their expensive watch is less accurate than the average iPhone. They just like the watch. And when we apply that to high-end, hi-fi, audiophile, whatever stuff, yeah, sure, you can spend money on nice stuff that you want to have, status symbols or luxury items or nicely built stuff. That's absolutely fine. I've got nothing against that. But it's this, when you then say, I've got this, it costs so much money and it sounds better than whatever you've got, or it sounds better than this other thing. Okay, well, now you're going to have to prove it because you've made some sort of qualitative claim, and now you can prove it in a blind test, and you will not be able to prove it in a blind test. You will fail in a blind test, and it happens time and time again. Blind tests are absolute, that's like kryptonite for audiophiles.